nobody really quite understood what I was trying to do. They thought it was going to be the hunger on an aircraft carrier. So there's a lot of trepidation about whether it's going to work or not work.
This was an enormous production, and it was a long process of every day fighting over, you know, making the best movie possible.
A lot of people came together who, at this time, this was important in their careers. They were really trying to prove something. So everybody had a lot at stake in this movie, and I think it really shows on the screen. And there's a lot of energy, enthusiasm that sort of plays all the way through down to, you know, the actors and the crew.
I thought it was going to be the greatest thrill, and it was. It went beyond that.
Top Gun was a magazine article that I saw in California Magazine, and I just flipped it on Don's desk. I said, "This is Star Wars on Earth. We should make this." And he said, "Wow, this is great." He started reading through the article and said, "This is wonderful. I've never seen this before." We had no idea that the school even existed, and so we purchased the article. It took us a while to get it, and we pitched it to then Jeffrey Katzenberg was the head of production. He took over when Don left, and Jeffrey loved the idea. And he hired what he thought were his best writers, which they were at the time, named Cash and Epps.
Our involvement in film began, my partner, Jim Cash, with a breakfast meeting with Jeff Katzenberg. He had famous 8 a.m. Story meetings, so I met with him, and he pitched about 8 ideas to us, of which one of them was Top Gun. And because I had my private pilot's license, I said, this sounds really interesting. And I also thought I might get a jet ride out of it. So I was really almost more interested in the potential of a jet ride than anything else. And then basically they sent us a magazine article from California Magazine, and it was about Top Guns, about the school itself. And what was interesting about the article was sort of generic, talked about these guys, they seemed like fun guys, but there was a photograph of a pilot, sort of a point of view picture of a guy with his helmet on, and there's 2 planes on the side, about 28,000 feet in the clouds. And for me, that picture just sort of went, wow, there's a movie there. I really saw an image, and that image became something that I sought to try to capture. Once we said we're interested, then we met with Simpson Bruckheimer. They very much wanted us, but we were concerned about, will the military allow us to do it? Because I didn't want to get involved in a movie that didn't get made. I really want to get something made, because we had written 6 pictures before this and not one of them got shot. So we were concerned about, look, if the Navy doesn't give us the gear, it's not going to look right. I didn't want to have it shot on a blue screen on a sound stage and have this tacky-looking movie. It had to be shot at 28,000 feet. And Don and Jerry said, absolutely. I mean, our minds were at the same place. It had to have a look that we had never seen before.
We went through a long process of trying to get the Navy involved in the project. You can't make this movie without the F-14s, and at the time the technology isn't as advanced as it is today, so you couldn't do the CG work that the movie needed. It would have been enormously costly, and in the end it wouldn't look as good. So we needed those big airplanes.
At the time of the announcement of Paramount and Paramount's interest, I happened to be in the CO's office, who at that time was a new CO, Captain Chris Wilson, and his call sign is Boomer. Received a call from Washington that said that Paramount had bought the rights to the article, and they were going to send down a writer who happened to be Jack Epps to do some preliminary work to see if it made any sense to do a film about it. Now, at that time, there was a little bit of concern because there had been a prior movie done, Final Countdown, in which the fighter squadron involved and the CO involved had gotten in some legal troubles because of some extra things they had taken from the movie people. And so the first thing we asked for was legal help, and the next thing was to make sure that the technical advisor was not someone on active duty, and that's how they came to hunt down Pete Pettigrew, who went on to be the technical advisor for the movie.
I got a call from my wife saying that 2 guys from Hollywood had called. They wanted to do a movie on Top Gun, and they wanted to know if I was interested in being a technical advisor. What had actually happened was my best friend, who had been an instructor at Top Gun with me, was back in Washington, D.C. when Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer went back to talk with the Chief of Naval Operations about doing the movie, whether the Navy would support the movie or not. So they called me. I went up to Hollywood and interviewed with them, got hired, and then we started the screenplay after that with Jim Cash and Jack Hibbs.
Before I did the research, I had one idea what the movie was about. My concept was probably closer to that, you know, it's closer to John Wayne, the pilots, they sit in the seats and they do this sort of, and it's more of just a pilot thing. So once we did the research, everything changed, and that really was so critical to this movie. So I went down to San Diego, NAS Miramar, and once you get around Navy pilots, they're just, I mean, you just get absorbed with them. You want to be them. You know, I told my wife if I was a little younger, I would have enlisted. It was just, it was fun. Very open, and what was sort of interesting to me was they spoke a language I couldn't understand. The first meeting I had was at the RAG, and what's the RAG? And I'm talking to these guys, and they're spitting out all these terms and phrases, and I swear after an hour I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I said, yeah, that's great, that's great. What did they say? And that actually ended up in the movie too, because we decided that that's just how they talk. We never explained terminology in the movie. It was a decision we made rather than say, hey, he's my RIO. That means radar intercept officer. We just said it's a RIO, you know, and they're going to figure it out as it comes along. And so that also played a big part into the framing of the movie. My first ride was on F5 with the CO, Boomer, and that just sort of changed my life and changed what the movie was about. Because once you strap yourself into a jet, you got your G suit on, you're on a runway, and these guys kick it in, and you go off. It's like nothing you've ever felt before in your life, and you're just flying out, and it's whew, pew, pew, and suddenly you're just through the clouds, traveling at speeds at an altitude you've never been, in a plane that was like a little sports car. I mean, it's like being a little MG, and you're strapped into it. Now, the first time you get into a plane like that, your instinct is to put your hands at your sides and hold on to something. And look down, there's the ejection seat handles. Hands away. And so that flight, what happened in that flight was they just did things, they just basic stuff. They pulled 6, 7 Gs, you know, crushed me into little pieces, did barrel rolls, did rolling scissors. There was another pilot by the name of Truman, and so they did a lot of dogfighting, a lot of ACM. I don't think I ever understood what aerial combat was and how hard it was, and just, you know, how the turns were so snap turns and things happen with such force. I mean, if you've never had 6 or 7 Gs pulled on you, you don't know what that's like. And it's not like this 600-pound lady sitting on you. It's like the 4-ton elephant. So what came out of that was just how physical this was. That this was just not flying, as I knew it as a private pilot, but this was a sporting event. That this was one of the greatest athletic things I'd ever been involved with in my life. So I came out of that flight with a sense that the key to this movie is how athletic these guys are. So my partner and I approached it and we said, well, wait a minute, what this really is about sports. If we take the movie aside, from my point of view as a writer, Top Gun is a sports movie. And the sport is ACM, aerial combat maneuvering. And any athlete knows that you go and you're always trying to see who's the best in any situation. And so to us, we sort of frame the movie more on the athletic side than on the military side.
What are you doing? Tip of the spear. Just wondering, best to be sharp. Who's the best?
Jim and I had a very interesting relationship. It was really unique, a terrific guy. And our relationship was long distance. Jim lived in East Lansing, Michigan, at Michigan State, and I lived in Santa Monica. And so we worked for 20 years, you know, on the phones, on computers, long distance. And we basically only got together in a room 2 or 3 times, wrote together once in the same room. All our work was really done via telephone.
As the process started, what I found out was that like 3 times a week, I'd get a call at like 9 o'clock at night, and we'd have these 3-way conversations between East Lansing, Hollywood, and myself, and we'd have an hour discussion over the screenplay, and we'd discuss numerous things, and and it got to be pretty humorous because some of the questions they asked me got to be pretty bizarre.
Pete Pettigrew was really amazing inspiration for us. He sort of represented the fighter pilot of the 70s and 80s, and Pete was a MiG killer. He was the real guy. And so one of the luckiest things I think that ever happened from our perspective was being involved with Pete Pettigrew, because as a technical advisor, he was just fabulous, because you ask Pete a question and he gives you a story. You ask Pete, how this works, and he'll just work it all the way out.
One of the things they said was, we have to have a locker room scene. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why do you have to have a locker room scene? This is a movie about fighter pilots. And he said, well, you don't understand. He said, we're trying to make this a movie about excellence. What we're going to do is we're going to show them a locker room scene so that they think more about sports. You know, we do athletics. Athletics is excellence. So what we're going to do is sublimate people. And I said, well, okay. He said, number two, he said, there are things we can say in a locker room that we can't say anyplace else because they're not wearing their rank and they're not wearing uniforms. And therefore, we have to have discussions in a locker room that we can't have anyplace else. And I said, well, okay. And they said, and we're paying $1 million for Tom Cruise. We've got to show some flesh. So I go, okay, locker room. The worst of all was the Top Gun trophy. They just came to me and they said, we have to have a Top Gun trophy. There has to be a trophy and somebody has to win it. And I said, well, there's no trophy. I said, if there was a Top Gun trophy, no one would ever graduate. You don't understand the intensity of these guys. You know, it would all be mid-air collisions and crashes and everybody die. Nobody'd ever graduate from Top Gun.
The Top Gun trophy was just, it's a great dramatic license. We need a culmination for this education process. We need something that comes out of it. It's very anti-Top Gun. You know, Maverick as a character is anti-Top Gun. It's all about being together. So it was a dramatic license, and I think it worked. But I had no trouble taking dramatic license. Never let the truth get in the way of a good movie. I hand the script into Don and Jerry, and it got what every writer loves, which is a phone call, and Don Simpson calls up and says, I'll kill to get this movie made, which is, you know, that's what you want to hear.
I got a call on the jetway in Phoenix, and it's Don Simpson, and he says, Pete, I just read the screenplay. He says, it is the greatest screenplay I've ever seen. He said, I read half of it, and I took it and I threw it against the wall. I was so excited about the fact that it was the finest screenplay I'd ever read. Problem was, I had read the screenplay about 3 nights before because it had been sent to me, and I knew we couldn't do it.
There were a couple things the Navy didn't like. They didn't like the original title was Top Guns with an S. That was after the California Magazine article. So they said, no, it's Top Gun, get it? So they changed that. And also, we had a mid-air collision, and that was the Navy said, no mid-air collision. It's got to be something else.
I got a call around 9 o'clock at night again from Jim and Jack. And they said, we've got a problem. We have to have an accident. It can be a single airplane accident. Maverick, he has to feel responsible for what happened, but not blamed by the Navy, and the Rio has to die. So what I did is I just went back to all the accidents that I'd ever remembered in the Navy, trying to come up with something that fit. And it turned out that I'd had a friend that was in the gun pattern and had flown into the jet wash of an airplane in front of him, flamed out an engine, airplane went into a flat spin. And in a flat spin in an F-14, there are two problems. One is that it's going around very, very fast. The pilot who's outside the center of the spin is pushed forward into the instrument panel by centrifugal force, and he can't get back to get to the ejection handle. The Rio is more towards the center of the spin, so he is more able to get to the ejection handle. Second problem is that there's a low pressure area that builds up above the airplane, and in an ejection sequence, the canopy has to go first. Because in modern airplanes, you can't eject through a canopy. Everybody thinks you can, but you really can't. They're too strong. So you have to get rid of the canopy first. In a flat spin, the canopy tends to hang up in that low pressure area right above the airplane as you're going around in the spin, and it stays there for a while and then goes away. So one of the things they recommend is that the Rio blow the canopy first, wait and make sure it's gone, and then eject the pilot and eject himself. So what we tried to show was that Goose doesn't realize that there's not enough time, so he just ejects himself. He hits the canopy, gets the canopy out of the way, and then Maverick ejects. Basically, that's what I was trying to portray, and it worked out pretty well.
I remember reading the screenplay on the deck of my house one Sunday afternoon, just getting so excited about what they turned in. And we sent it in to Paramount, and they weren't as excited as we were.
Paramount they didn't like it. They didn't get it. And the first response was, there's too many planes in the air. You know, no, he wants to see a movie with all these planes flying around. We're saying, no, you don't understand. It's nothing you've ever seen before. This is a whole different thing. These aren't planes. These are fighter pilots. This whole thing. And another executive wanted to make it not about. He wanted to make it about how to fly a plane, and there was a certain wild way, and he had to learn how to fly the stick and all this sort of stuff.
And so they wanted to put it in turnaround. And so Don and I went up to Michael Eisner and Jeff Katzenberg in their office and said, you can't do this. We love this project. We think it's a huge hit movie. You got to let us continue. And Don got to a point where he actually got on his knees and begged Michael not to put the picture in turnaround. And Michael looked at Jeffrey, says, we've got to let them keep developing the project. If they're this passionate about it, we can't turn them down.
And so, in essence, we did another set of drafts, and then the movie just died. It just nothing happened to it. It totally just died, and that was it. It was our 7th script. We handed in, and it wasn't going to be made.
Then Eisner and Katzenberg both left Paramount and went on to Disney. And as soon as a new management comes in, usually they strip everything and start their own development. We were very fortunate. We had a lunch with Ned Tannen, who came in and replaced Jeffrey and Michael. And he said to us at lunch, he said, "What do you have? We got nothing to make. We want to make some movies." And we pitched the idea of Top Gun. He hadn't read it. And he said, "What do you think it's going to cost?" He looked at me and I said, "Yeah, around $14 million. He said, "Go make it."
I'd done a movie called The Hunger 4 years before, with David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve, and Hollywood hated it, and I couldn't get arrested. You know, they thought it was an artsy, fartsy, esoteric, up itself vampire movie, yeah. And I think they thought it was too artsy, too dark, too slow, yeah. And so Hollywood didn't like me for it. So it took me 4 more years, and then Don and Jerry saw The Hunger.
Both Don and I were a fan of The Hunger. We thought it was just a beautifully made picture, and even though the picture didn't do well, and I'm sure it didn't help Tony's career, we felt that he had an enormous amount of talent.
And I think what actually clinched it was not The Hunger. Well, Don was out there, so Don liked The Hunger, yeah. And but they saw my commercial showreel, and they were looking for directors who'd shot any footage with jets. In my commercial showreel, I had something for Saab. Saab builds the cars in Sweden, also build the jets, the Vingens. So I had a car racing a jet, and I think I was one of the few directors that actually shot jets. Based on that, they brought me into a meeting, and they offered me Top Gun, and I thought Top Gun should be like Apocalypse Now. It should be in the bowels of an aircraft carrier in the Indian Ocean, and dark and sort of unforgiving. And I was that because I just come out of 8 years at art school and commercials, and I always wanted to go back to my roots, which was darkness. Yeah. And I didn't quite get it. You know, it took me 2 runs at it really to get it. You know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to make the movie at first. You know, and then all of a sudden I saw it. I didn't quite understand what Don and Jerry were saying, because I always got this tunnel vision about what I want to do, and it's very sort of selfish. And I had this vision about, you know, Apocalypse Now, an aircraft carrier, and then I woke up one morning and I said I got it, and it wasn't Apocalypse Now. It was a definite popcorn movie, but it was the rock and roll stars of the sky. So I saw these great looking guys, actors, or jet fighter pilots, against blue black skies and silver jets and rock and roll music, you know. And I said, this is what the guys are talking about.
As we're writing the script, this movie came out called All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise. And so when I was writing it, we just saw Tom in the role. He just seemed like Maverick. And so we just kept writing it for him. We kept a visual in our mind. And when I gave the script to Simpson and Bruckheimer, I said, you know, think Tom Cruise. And they got it.
We thought that was a terrific casting idea. And we stuck with it and kept calling the agent, kept saying the script's coming, we want him to do it. And just over a year and a half during the development of it, just kept in touch and had him in the office and talked to him about it. But we never could get him to commit. So we were at our wits' end. Finally, I arranged with the Navy to allow Tom to go up in with the Blue Angels and sit in the back seat. And it was in El Centro, California. Tom jumped on his motorcycle and rode down there with his ponytail, and these young fighter jocks see this kid and this hippie, they thought, with this long ponytail, and we said, we're going to give this kid a ride of his life.
I loved airplanes. I always loved airplanes. I wanted to fly since I was a little kid. And I thought it was going to be the greatest thrill. And it was. It went beyond that.
And so Tom jumped in that plane, and they did barrel rolls. They did everything they possibly could do, and thinking that they would scare the wits out of Tom. But Tom jumped out of the plane and said, I want to make this movie. He called me from a payphone. He said, I'm ready to go. Let's go do it.
I could not wait to fly in those airplanes, and I saw what they were going to do technically with the picture. And I just finished Legend with Ridley Scott, and Tony Scott was his brother. And Tony Scott had directed The Hunger, and I knew of him, and very talented director. And then I went in the office, and they showed me, and Tony talked to me, and talked me through it, and Don and Jerry did, what this movie was going to be, what they were going to do with it. And, man, I couldn't wait.
So you had Tom, so I thought we've got to, you know, it's obviously got to find somebody to contrast Tom for Iceman, you know, so, and I did a casting session in New York, and this kid came in with this black eye. I mean, it was so black and so ugly. Now, I was totally closed up. When he could see the whites, they were purple, and it was Val Kilmer.
At the time, I had the same agent as Tom Cruise, so I heard about it fairly early on. And I just really wasn't interested in it. And I liked Tony Scott very much, but I turned it down. And Tony ran after me, literally ran after me, stopped me in the hallway right in front of the elevator, got in front of the elevator doors, and said, "You've got to do it, man. It's going to be great." And he described, you know, with this enthusiasm and relish how it was going to be seen and what the role meant and why it was, you know, crucial to the story.
And Val's such a sort of off-center, dark, strange but great-looking guy, and I thought it was a great contrast with Tom. And then I took the Das Boot principle in terms of started to bounce the Rick Rossoviches and all the other guys in the cast.
Top Gun at that time was like the it project. I mean, if you were a young guy in Hollywood, I mean, that was all that was on your mind. I remember Charlie Sheen like coming to me and said, "Hey, I just met with Tony Scott." I said, "I'll be the man in the booth if you'll let me. I just want to be in this movie, you know." And Charlie was about 18. I think he was just too young, but I mean, this was the movie to get.
I'd done a movie for Paramount before, Lords of Discipline, and I guess I was kind of on a list, you know, a short list of young guys that had that look, and so I took a meeting with Tony, and it was great because I went into his office at Paramount there, and he was on the phone. Tony, if you know Tony, he's doing like 4 things at once. And I saw on the floor there was a Bruce Weber book. The guy on the cover of the book, it was like a shot from behind, and I looked just like this guy. And he got off the phone. I said, "Hey, I see you got my picture on this, right?" And he goes, "What, man? What?" I said, "Yeah, that's me. I'm on this book. You see this? Look at this, and look, it's me."
One of my favorite books in terms of that I stole from in terms of looks of male models that I was shooting in commercials was a guy called Bruce Weber. He had this book of all these guys, these great-looking guys, and the centerfold in this book had these 3 guys sitting inside this Chevy, and they're all no shirts on, their haircuts. One looked just like Tom, one looked just like Val. So, and then the other one in the background was this sort of jock looked like Rick Rossovich, you know. So, I took that into Paramount, and they went, when they saw this book, they thought I was gonna take too big a leaf out of that book for this movie, but that really became the look of the movie, became the look of the actors.
I remember one instance where we finally got the approval from the Navy, and the next thing we had to do was meet with the head of the base at Miramar, because it's his base. He decides what goes on at his base, and he read the script and says, "I don't believe the script. You're not going to shoot here." And we said, "Well, why don't you believe the script?" He says, "We just don't do these things in the Navy." And we said, "Like what?" He said, "We don't allow our officers to date one another." And initially in the story, Tom was a pilot, and he met with an enlisted individual who was the Kelly McGillis character, and he said, "You can't film here." And he said, "Well, what interaction do your young Navy officers have with, let's say, outsiders who work on the base?" He said, "Well, we have the RAND Corporation who comes in and evaluates our performance. We have these exercises where we go out on like battle groups and run war scenarios, and they grade us." And I said, "Are any of them women?" He said, "Of course." And that's where Kelly's character came from. Kelly McGillis had just done Witness, and we thought she was an extraordinary actress. And Tony and I think, went to New York and Don to meet with her and had coffee with her, where she told us her whole life story in like 20 minutes. But she was very engaging and very bright, and I thought she was perfect to play up against Tom.
And I just felt that Kelly had more of maturity to her, whether as an age or just, I think it's a mental maturity. And I thought Kelly was the way to go, because she's beautiful, but she felt, Paramount especially were expecting something younger, and I say more glamorous or more rock and roll. Yeah. But I thought that we should believe that Kelly could talk to these guys, could lecture these guys, and I thought she was great for that. And she'd just done Witness, and I saw her with the shirt off, so I said she's got the role.
I feel the need for speed.
Anthony Edwards was a brilliant contrast to Tom and to Iceman. You know, and Anthony was, I think, relatively unknown then, and Anthony had this odd quality for a fighter pilot, which I thought was just an interesting way of playing him. Again, he's funny, he's charming, but he's got a more serious side to him than the rest of the guys had. But at the same time, it was a contrast, humor versus seriousness. And he's always the buddy. Yeah, he's always the guy to put your arm around you when you're feeling rough. He's the guy to get killed. Meg Ryan was unknown, but Meg came in, she had this sort of, I don't know, just a unique quality in terms of this girlishness.
Tony sent me a tape, and sent Don and myself a tape of the actress he wanted to use, and it wasn't Meg Ryan. And I kind of felt he could do better. I thought there just was something missing. I didn't believe her performance, and I said, "Who's your second choice?" And he sends this tape over of Meg Ryan, and she was so bubbly and smart and a wonderful actress. And I said, "Why don't you want to use her?" She comes off a soap opera. You know, I'm not sure I want to do that. I said, "Nobody cares. Nobody's going to know. How many guys watch soap operas?" So we settled on Meg.
I was very comfortable, very happy with my cast before I started shooting. And that rarely happens. You always got some misgivings about somebody. You know, somebody's not quite there, but I felt each of those characters filled those roles completely.
1, 2, 3, eject. Okay, if you're all right, give me a thumbs up. That was great. It was a good shot.
Before the movie started, we wanted the actors to feel what it's like to really be a pilot, and we wanted them to get in shape. We wanted them to be in good physical shape. So we sent them down to the Navy to go through a course on what a pilot goes through. And in order to fly in an F-14, you have to go through a 4-day survival course.
That was really exciting to know that, you know, that was going to be like a perk, that we actually get this thrill ride and really get a seat from the inside. So we all had to be certified, and we had to go through all the things that a pilot would actually have to do.
Had to go through the ejection seat training and all the training so that I could fly in the F-14, and we had to take our masks off, and they had to be able to see how the effects at high altitude without oxygen.
Okay, now the low side of the chamber only. Reach up and hold the mask tight to your face with one hand. With the other, release one of your retention fittings, but keep the mask up to your face. Okay, and then when I say release, I want you to let go of your mask and turn your oxygen supply off at the console. Okay, and begin your demonstrations. 6 to 7, turn face each other. We're starting to break up here, okay. Okay, 7 has had it. There's a little tetany there. Mask to the face, oxygen on.
Of course, we weren't going to fly the plane, but we were going to sit in the back, and we'd have to know certain procedures in case something went wrong. We'd have to throw a fuse or pull this or eject.
So we would go into the dunking tanks. We had to tread water for 15 minutes in a full flight suit, which doesn't sound that much until about 10 minutes into it, and you know, they're fishing people out of the pool.
We're in full gear, you know, helmet, everything, the boots, flight suit, and I'm treading water, and all of a sudden, one of my boots starts to come off. It came unlaced somehow, and what happened was it started to pull me down, and I started to actually drown, and they wouldn't really pull me to the side of and I was just literally like maybe a foot or two from the edge of the pool, but they wouldn't really like pull me out, and I got through it, but it was, they called me Rock Rosovich, think like a rock. It was kind of.
Oh, it was cool. I mean, you know, 22 years old, getting ready to go for an F-14. I mean, what else is there?